The beauty of Kokshetau is a delight to the eye. The city's streets boast a distinct style and its residents are welcoming. Today we find ourselves in Kokshetau, exploring 3 sites and sharing their histories. So let's begin.
Our family lived in a small wooden one-story house surrounded on all sides by birches and willows. In spring, the house was engulfed in blooming bird cherry blossoms, and in summer, the garden was adorned with a plethora of flowers.
In these memoirs, the atmosphere of the late 19th century is revived. Today, the birches and trees have yielded their places, but the structure itself has endured to our days. So let's discover the building that houses the Museum of History of Kokshetau city. The single-story log cabin is well crafted, with corners tightly bound. Especially the windows look like they've retained their original charm. However, atop them, instead of a rhombus, there is now a Kazakh ornament.
This site is now known as the Museum of the History of Kokshetau. The very name implies that this building embodies the history of the city. Originally, it was an ordinary private house constructed in the late 19th century in the style of urban architecture. Situated in the part of the city that was well developed and populated by affluent citizens at that time. It was erected right at the foot of the hill. At that time, there was a pine grove on that hill. It is a classical type of construction. The windows are intricately patterned. The Akmola region and Kokshetau in particular were a trade hub in the 19th century. Wealthy Russian and Tatar merchants sought to settle in the city, erecting beautiful buildings. Often their houses were made of wood or red brick. According to architects, the Museum of the History of Kokshetau, which is the focus of today's episode, is a building with the distinctive style of that era. The preservation of this historical site is attributed to the presence of wooden columns.
Музей один из образцов, это здание один из образцов архитектуры конца XIX века.
The building is an exemplary piece of architecture from the late 19th century. It is a monument of Republican significance. In Kokshetau, we have very few of such ancient houses left. This house was constructed using a method known at the time as tongue and groove cladding. In other words, the logs were laid practically without the use of nails. At that time, there was a porch with a canopy at the main entrance. However, in 2021, a reconstruction took place and a foundation was laid. Additionally, the exterior of the building was covered with transverse planks.
Inside the museum building, valuable items have been preserved. For instance, the window shutters and cornices are also made of wood. They are still preserved here as authentic elements originally used by the first owners of the house.
Сегодня в этом здании размещается музей истории города Kokshetau. The
building houses the Museum of the History of Kokshetau. Inside there is a small garden and a courtyard with cozy benches that have been preserved. Tourists and guests of our city love to visit this museum because it is like living history. People come and seem to immerse themselves in the past of our city. Unfortunately, few wooden buildings from the past are preserved. Today our city is growing, becoming more beautiful. However, I believe preserving these historic buildings is of great importance. Because they are witnesses not just to one era, not just to one historical epoch. There's so much more. They can tell a lot to the younger generation about the past life of our city.
Исторической эпохи могут многое рассказать подрастающему поколению о прошлой жизни нашего города.
Unfortunately, there is no precise information about the year of construction and the builder. However, it is evident that the house was constructed from pure pine, which serves as a distinctive feature. The building currently comprises 5 rooms, each with a unique theme. For instance, in one room, through everyday items, visitors can immerse themselves in the atmosphere of Kazakh national culture. Another room showcases city life, while a third focuses on the wartime period. Each small room is filled with antiques, the age of which exceeds 100 years. Antiques in the museum are not shielded behind glass. Visitors can hold them in their hands and feel their history. The museum features children's toys, irons, military clothing, musical instruments, and furniture. These authentic everyday items attract tourists from around the world.
Конечно, любой турист, приезжающий и посещающий город, он ищет какие-то...
Certainly, any tourist visiting a city seeks a touch of antiquity. People primarily come to look for buildings with well-preserved historic architecture. They come to our museum attracted to the remarkably preserved antique architecture. Moreover, inside the museum, we have temporarily created an exhibition reflecting the daily life of the townspeople from the 19th century to the mid-20th century. When tourists enter, they are fascinated by the interior, and through household items, they acquaint themselves with the history of the townspeople from different eras. Certainly, all these historic buildings are imbued with the spirit of their time. It is very interesting for tourists, and that's why historic buildings and architecture always evoke a special interest among tourists and residents in any city in Kazakhstan.
Она всегда вызывает особенный интерес у туристов и жителей любого города, наверное, Казахстана.
Kokshetau is home to countless forests, therefore in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the majority of houses constructed in the city were made of wood. These houses had similar architectural design, giving the city a distinctive appearance. Wealthy residents sought to create spacious homes with a large number of rooms. The entrance gates of Kokshetau's Museum of History were also made of wood. In 2021, the building underwent reconstruction, during which decayed logs were removed and the structure was reinforced through cementing.
The museum features an intriguing exhibit, original logs from the house's walls. During restoration, some of them were placed and positioned here to showcase how the house looked like when it was first made.
The building, covering an area of 124 square meters, housed 1 dining room and 3 bedrooms. According to the accounts of the townspeople, it previously functioned as a children's home.
From 1941 to 1945, this building served as the headquarters for the military hospital.
At that time, there were 4 hospitals in the city that provided medical assistance to wounded soldiers and prisoners. The decision-makers in the headquarters, located in the museum building, were responsible for referring the wounded to one of these 4 medical facilities. Later, this building was turned into a museum. In the 2000s, it was already functioning as the city's history museum. Interesting fact, a stable and a summer dining area were once located nearby. However, over time, both the stable and dining area were demolished. In 1985, as part of restoration works, the items lost within the museum were restored. The ceiling and interior walls were cleaned and redesign took place. The Museum of History in Kokshetau is considered one of the best museums not only in the region but also in the Republic.
In the city, there are several buildings that were used for military purposes during World War II. One of them is the Kokshetau City Local History Museum. Let's explore it together. Bazaar Square, as it was known in the early of 20th century, has evolved into Ablaykan Square and now hosts a local history museum.
This two-story building is a monument of history and architecture protected by the state.
Classicism, Art Nouveau, Neoclassicism. Describing the architectural type of this building can be challenging for an untrained eye, so let's seek insights from the experts to unveil its artistic identity.
Декоративное убранство, значит, вот этих организаций оконных вот этих сводов.
The decorative elements of the window arches with no lintels, the way the brickwork is performed and the texture of the materials, all this is characteristic of that time. The building is made of bricks in a classical style.
Сделано из кирпича. Это сделано в стиле.
This is typical for the construction style of buildings erected in northern Kazakhstan and the central part of Russia. We can also see a certain touch of the ancient Azerbaijani style here. When the city of Sarayshik was being built, architects from Byzantium and Azerbaijan were invited.
Есть архитекторов, древних азербайджанских архитекторов.
This style was also employed during the construction of buildings in Moscow. There are certain resemblances, namely the way the window arches, pilasters and cornices are made.
Для строительства Москвы характерно. И вот оттуда какой-то имеет отклик.
This is one of the first brick structures of the city, initially erected as a wine warehouse. I'm super excited to see what this place has to offer inside.
The history of the museum is rich and diverse. Its first owner was the wealthy nobleman of Polish-Lithuanian origin Gennady Shmurlo, who moved to Kokshetau in the second half of the 19th century. Initially, the building served as a winery and was part of State Wine Warehouse Complex No. 7. The warehouse operated until 1915 and was closed due to World War I. In 1918, the administrative building of the warehouse housed the County Council of People's Deputies, as marked by a memorial plaque. During the Civil War, special chambers for laundering were set up in the basement of the house. Additionally, during this time, detainees were held in these premises, especially during the 1921 Kulak uprising. In the 1930s, the building was used as a distillery. During the Second World War, the building housed the management of the factory and one of the workshops of the secret enterprise number 621, established in 1941 based on the Kokshetau mechanical plant and the Podolsk sewing machine plant. It is said that warm clothing for soldiers on the front line was produced in this building. Later, it became an education department and eventually a center for creativity. In its early years, the museum housed only 130 items of historical value. However, as of today, its collection boasts more than 83,000 exhibits. The museum takes pride in the diversity of its collection, encompassing history, archaeology, ethnography, nature, and the culture of the region. Each hall is dedicated to a specific theme.
The window has kept its original state. There is a possibility that this exact room was used as a wine warehouse, but now the museum keeps its exhibitions here.
The exterior of the building is particularly impressive. It stands tall and attractive, bearing witness to its past beauty. More repair work has been done inside than outside, leading to the loss of essential interior details.
One of the things that reached us from the past is the railing. The handrail and the railings themselves are still kept in their original state.
Ғимараттың құрылысы негізінен 1904 жылы басталды.
Construction of the building began in 1904 after the region was granted the status of an oblast in 1945. The museum was established as the Kokshetau Regional Historical and Local Lore Museum. Initially, it was under the administration of the Aida Bol Distillery, serving as its branch. They did not produce but stored on site.
сақтаған және де дамытқан. Негізінен
The exterior of the building largely remained unrepaired until 2012, when a major renovation was carried out.
ішіне реэкспозициялар көп жасалған, яғни залдарды бірнеше жыл өңдеуден өткізген. Оның соңғысы 2019 жылы жасалған.
According to museum staff, the exterior of the building underwent restoration, including fixing worn areas and replacing fallen bricks with new ones. It is particularly impressive that the red bricks retained their integrity until the repair work was conducted. Legend has it that X might have been used in the production of these bricks. Currently, this building is under state protection and comprises 11 halls. The museum houses artifacts reflecting the history of the Akmola region and Kokshetau. It serves as a place not only for our fellow countrymen, but also for foreigners eager to immerse themselves in Kazakh culture. Information is provided in 3 languages.
11 зал, көбінесе осы
In the 11 halls of the museum, historical relics are preserved, reflecting the lives of the peoples who primarily inhabited the territory of Kokshetau and Akmola region. Until 1975, the museum was housed in the central mosque.
музей, орталық музей.
In the city of Kokshetau, landmarks are not limited to museums alone. The city itself is steeped in history. This is the Zhaqiya Qaji Mosque. That's its current name. Previously, it was known as Naubanbay Talasula Mosque. The building of the mosque is ancient and its walls testify to it. Aerial images demonstrate that the building still retains its pristine beauty.
Бұл мешіт 1903 жылы басталып 1904 жылы салынып бітірілді шамамен.
The construction of this mosque began in 1903 and was completed in 1904 with the participation of 2 wealthy residents of the settlement, Shayachmet and Bayazid, supported by the community.
Өз үйін мектеп қылып ашқан Naubanbay Talasulaның
The mosque was named after Naubanbay Talasula, who founded a school in his house in this region. It served as a mosque from 1904 until 1920. However, after the establishment of Soviet power in the 1920s, the minarets of the mosque were dismantled, and it was converted into an exhibition and warehouse space. This continued until 1941.
1941 жылдан бастап 1945 жылдар арасында Ұлы Отан соғысы кезінде бұл жерде әскери бөлім болған.
The Zhaqiya Qaji Mosque was converted into a military warehouse between 1941 and 1945. There is evidence that it stored clothing, ammunition, and even military equipment.
From 1947 to 1974, this mosque was actually a local history museum, and the exhibitions we last saw at the previous location were presented here.
In 1975, the building was transformed into an exhibition hall of the Republican Art Department. In 1985, renovations were carried out. In 1989, local authorities conducted a reconstruction of the building. They restored the previously demolished tower and opened a new mosque.
Типизированный классический стиль.
The building is designed in a typical classical style which was prevailing in Siberia and northern Kazakhstan. It features similar spires, domes, and wooden board siding. All of these is commonly found in northern regions of Kazakhstan and Siberia. There were no distinctive features. In Central Asia and in Uzbekistan in particular, such wooden patterns and style were not observed.
Богатых деревянных узоров, таких восточных канонов, вот это не соблюдалось.
In 1991, the building underwent major renovations. Architects emphasized that the value of this building lies in its history rather than a unique architectural style. The building has many windows and their frames are adorned with characteristic designs of that time. The interior of the mosque is also modest. Upon entering, the prayer hall is immediately revealed with no additional rooms. Despite the fact that it was built many years ago, the mosque continues to maintain its authenticity.
The front of the building shows a mix of different styles from the past. It blends classical design with fancy curved windows. The ends of the locks are nicely covered, and the button and the top of the windows have fancy, pretty flower designs curved into them.
The Zhaqiya Qaji Mosque in Kokshetau is built in the Tatar style, reflecting the presence of a significant Tatar population in the city. During that time, Kokshetau had a street that the people called a Kazan street, where predominantly Tatar residents lived. One of these immigrants, Nizami Salakov, was a carpenter whose ancestors hailed from the Baltachi region in northern Tatarstan. In the mid-19th century, Nizami Salakov and his father relocated to Kazakhstan. Kokshetau merchants hired the carpenters from the Salakov dynasty for this project. The Salakovs, along with other carpenters, participated in the construction of the oldest mosque in Kokshetau, the wooden houses of the first guild merchant Bagauddin Bayazitov, and the current building of the Museum of Kokshetau's history. Moreover, they say that the renovation of the Zhaqiya Qaji Mosque was initiated by Ibrahim Salakov. This building is listed among the country's valuable historical mosques that are subject to special protection and preservation of historical sites.